guys, it's Kevin again, and this is my review for Tenet. So what Tenet is essentially about is we center on a nameless protagonist, literally just called the protagonist, and he is sent on this task where basically he has to stop this mission that is going to cause World War III, and he's only armed by one word in order to do that, and basically he sets off on this quest to hopefully stop this from happening, and that's really all I'm going to say. So Tenet overall, I was obviously hyped for this film, for a couple reasons. I mean, one, because it's Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan directing a movie pretty much always gets me excited. I think he is one of the most innovative and different directors working today. I think he's one of the few directors out there that really still cares about, you know, seeing things on the biggest screen possible and what you can do with, like, you know, the scope of movies and things like that. The way that he constantly is topping himself in that category. I mean, that's just something that I got so excited for. But also the fact that this really was going to be the film to welcome everyone back to the theaters. And though it really wasn't, because we did have Unhinged, this really was going to be the first, like, big blockbuster to welcome everyone back, and that everyone can collectively look forward to going back to the movies again. And, you know, knowing that Tenet was finally coming out, I just got so incredibly excited for it. The way that Nolan was hyping it up, I was really looking forward to seeing how it was going to turn out. So I finally saw it on Monday. I somehow did not get to review it till now, and I will say this about Tenet. There's definitely a lot to like about this movie, but I gotta be honest, I was quite disappointed by this film. Tenet does have a lot what you've come to expect from a Nolan film, but unfortunately, it's far messier and confusing than I think any of us was really expecting it to be. But we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. Now, I will say, in terms of performances in this film, I mean, this cast is very stacked. There's some really great actors in here, and everyone does a really great job. I don't think there's, like, a bad performance in this movie. John David Washington is really good here, and that's to be expected because he's a great actor. We've seen him before in things like BlacKkKlansman, and he definitely does do a really good job here. He proves that he can be a lead in, like, a big blockbuster, and I really did like what he ended up doing. He was very charismatic. He was very likable. He has some really fun moments in this movie, and I really like what he ended up doing. And Robert Pattinson as well, I thought was a really good sort of co-lead for him. The dynamic between the two I enjoyed quite a bit. I think that Pattinson had some really quippy and fun lines, and the back and forth between them was something that I was looking forward to in this movie, and it definitely did not disappoint, and I enjoyed what we ended up getting from those two. I thought that they were a lot of fun, and they were doing all they could to try to, you know, add some depth to these characters. I thought they did a good job with that overall. For me, though, easily the big standout of this movie, I would say, performance-wise, is Elizabeth Debicki, who I thought was fantastic here. And I've seen her in, you know, a lot of great stuff, but I actually really liked her a lot in this film, mainly because she is the character that feels like she has the most to work with in terms of acting. And I thought that she really took this to her fullest potential. The character of Kat is someone who is suffering a lot. There's a lot of trauma that she's gone through. There's a personal stake in this mission for her, and the way that Debicki really kind of goes through that, and you see, you know, what she needs to do in order to get out of this situation that she's in, which I really don't want to spoil, I thought was fantastic, and I loved what Debicki ended up doing in this role. She was very easily, I think, the best performance out of everyone here, and I think the movie's worth seeing alone just for her performance. I think she did a really good job, for sure. Everyone else in the film, I think, is pretty good here. I mean, Dimple Kapadia definitely does a good job. Kenneth Branagh, this is a very different kind of role for him. He is very much, people have compared him to, like, a Bond villain, and I definitely wouldn't disagree. This guy is very over the top. He is screaming a lot of the time. He's very evil, and he, you can tell, is having so much fun in this role. He really sinks his teeth into it, and I thought Branagh definitely did do a really good job with what he had here. Overall, I was pretty impressed by the acting in this film. There's quite a few problems in this movie, but I wouldn't really say the acting is really one of them at all. I think the acting is pretty consistent here. Now we get into the things that really do bring this film down, which is the directing and the writing. Now, the directing for this film, I don't think is bad. I really don't. I think the way that Nolan went about directing this film tonally is fine. It definitely feels more like an espionage type spy film, and I think that is what he was going for here. I've heard, like I said, a lot of people compare this to Bond films, and I would not disagree. I think that actually is a fair comparison. There's a lot of similarities to Bond films that Tenet has tonal-wise. There's a lot of similarities it has just in terms of like the scope of it and things like that, and I thought the directing was definitely really good, and I was impressed by the way that Nolan directed this film. So the directing definitely isn't the problem. I think that the tone is definitely correct. It's a very dark and it's definitely a very thrilling film in that way. Where we get to my issues, unfortunately, is something that I did not expect to say, and that is the screenplay here, which really, to be honest, is such a mess. It is easily Nolan's weakest screenplay to date, and there's a lot of issues with it for sure. One of them being that Nolan has consistently built this up as this big, innovative film that, oh, it's going to be so groundbreaking, it's going to blow your mind, and it really doesn't, to be honest. The plot here is very simple. It's very much just, you have this nameless protagonist, and he's doing what he can to prevent this event from going down. Some kind of time inversion. It's not time travel, but it's time inversion, and basically, you see him, he's traveling a bunch, he is trying to do what he can to get out of this mission, he's trying to take down the people that he needs to, and that's really it. It's a very simple plot, and again, considering how much hype there was, I was just expecting a lot more here, and I get what Nolan is trying to do when it comes to this movie. He is consistently tried to refer to this as very similar to Inception, and I actually don't think that's a fair comparison, because here's the thing. Inception is a film that, yes, can be confusing, but they do what they can in order to explain it to you as carefully and as delicately as possible. They really take their time in fleshing out this world and getting you to understand the way things work, the way that they're able to, go into these dreams, the way, what they're really doing, what the whole organization is about. There's so much that you understand there. There's so much intricate detail that when we eventually get into the heat of things, we actually care. There feels like there's actual stakes. Tenet, unfortunately, that isn't the case, largely because the audience is kept in the dark throughout a large majority of this movie. And I get why they were doing that, because our main character, the protagonist, who literally is just called the protagonist, is also kept in the dark. A lot of the time, he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't understand what his mission really is. And I get it that they want the audience to be just as confused, but the problem is, there's not, when you hide so much from us of what's going on, and you keep us not even within an arm's length, you pretty much keep it like just completely unknown to us throughout the movie. There's not much to get invested in here, especially when it comes to our main character. The protagonist just isn't that compelling of a character. I get it, they want him to be like the everyman, but there really isn't much he's going through character-wise. There is a personal stake he has in this mission, but that more falls in line with Elizabeth Debicki's character than it does him. You feel the urgency on her side of things, but you don't really feel it for the protagonist because we know so little about him. There's no real character arc that he's going through. And again, yes, he's a badass. Yes, he's fun to watch. And John David Washington is really good in the role, but there's only so much he can do to make this character interesting, because at least to me, he just wasn't. I did not find this character to be particularly compelling. I did not find this character to be someone that I really gravitated towards, and that really disappointed me, because I feel like Nolan is someone who has gotten a lot of criticism for this in the past, and I have very much defended him. But to be honest, I kind of see where people are coming from now, because this character is very flat. There really isn't much to him character-wise, and same goes with Robert Pattinson. There's not much else for him except that he is a little bit more rough around the edges than John David Washington's character. He's a bit more of a risk taker. There are things that he'll do that Washington wouldn't, but even at that, I mean, John David Washington is still, punching people out when he needs to. He's still kicking ass when he needs to. Like, he's not immune to these things. So again, there just isn't enough going on character-wise for me to really give a shit into what's happening. Again, I know what's happening is important. The film constantly tries to remind you, this is important. This is something that needs to go down. But because of the fact that we don't really understand fully what's going on, it just didn't. I honestly found myself kind of bored. I wasn't that invested into this story, and I think that really does hurt the film overall. Also, Nolan's obsession with time. I understand this is something that he's always tried to focus on in his other movies, but the way that it's done in this film is just not all that interesting to me. So they claim it's not time travel. It's instead like a time inversion is what they call it. But I don't really understand the difference. Like, I get it that, like, they're moving through time and they're not actually, like, traveling through it and, like, things are happening at the same time. But it's generally confusing. It's another one of those things where if they would have just explained it for, like, 5 minutes, I think maybe I would have actually been able to understand, like, what's going on here. But I really didn't. And I don't think they did a very good job with that at all. Again, I just think information is presented way too quickly to you in some scenes in this film, to the point where you're just kind of getting a bit annoyed. It's kind of, you're starting to check out. At least that's how I felt. I was starting to check out of some scenes in this movie, mainly because I just couldn't tell what was going on. I couldn't tell what they were really saying. I couldn't tell how certain things were working in this film. And again, maybe I'm just dumb, but there was so many points in this movie where I was like, okay, I know this is important, but I don't fully understand what this is going on. I don't fully understand what the stakes are here. It's just something that I was very much left in the dark about, and it was just a very frustrating experience in that way. So yeah, I just needed a lot more from the story here. But the other thing that really... It also is one of the only Nolan films that I can think of where these characters don't really feel like characters. A lot of them feel very much like expositional mouthpieces. The perfect example of this is Dimple Kapadia's character. Her character in this movie, her entire job is just to provide exposition. It's to get it's to get our protagonist to understand what is really going on here. It's to get our protagonist to really latch onto, some of what's happening. And that's fine. But at a certain point, I just kind of sat there and thought, what is the point of her character? Why is she really here? Why do we need her in this movie? There doesn't really seem to be much of a point there. And in fact, it's hard to tell where she actually is. The film jumps around constantly, so it's very hard to tell what actually is going on in the story because the film is just constantly moving. There isn't a second to breathe, and that was just very disappointing for me overall. I needed a lot more going on story-wise, and it just wasn't here. The only character, like I said, that I found myself somewhat invested in is really Elizabeth Debicki. Whenever we cut to her, I actually did feel something because there is a story there. There is an arc there. You get the sense that she's been in a very abusive relationship with Kenneth Branagh's character, and she's destined to do everything she can to get out of this. And again, there's personal stakes there for her. You care about her. You care about her relationship with her son. You care about this difficult relationship with her and Kenneth Branagh. You want her to flee from that as soon as she can. But with the other characters, that just isn't there. There isn't much of an emotional attachment to them. There isn't much of a story. So we're literally going through aimlessly with this main character who is almost a complete blank slate throughout the movie, and it just isn't all that interesting to me. So also, as much as I do like Kenneth Branagh in this movie, his character as the villain is so one-dimensional. He quite literally is just the angry generic villain that wants to take over the world and has his own stuff that he's going on. He treats everyone like shit. There's no real character there. There's no human there. And that's the other thing with some of Nolan's other villains, like Bane, for example, in The Dark Knight Rises. There is a person underneath that mask. You understand his motivation. Kenneth Branagh's character in this movie, I just didn't sense much of a motivation here. I didn't sense much of a character from him, and that really hurt the film for me. There's just a lot more that he could have done. Also, Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, this is someone that Nolan has kept in the dark, and I honestly don't understand why. There really is nothing that particularly special to him. I don't want to say anything because he's kept that character so secret, but I don't know why he kept him so secretive. There really is nothing that special about him that, drastically changes the film if you know about him going in. There really is nothing there. So yeah, the screenplay just really let me down here. There's a lot more that I think Nolan could have done, and it just felt like he was way too focused on the technical side of things, because obviously, yes, cinematography wise, this film is fantastic. There are some really incredible shots here that are definitely going to stick out in my mind, but to be honest, I think he's a little too focused on it. I think there is some really great cinematography. I think there are some action scenes that are very entertaining for sure. A lot of which, though, you did see in the trailer. There weren't too many action scenes here that really blew me away. Like, the car chase is a fantastic action set piece. I think there's some really great stuff going on there. The way that he put that together, I think is just incredible. I can't even think about how he was able to, put that all together. Or the, the one in the, the restaurant where they're fighting. I think that's a really good scene, like the warehouse fight. There are definitely some really good action set pieces here, and I think cinematography-wise, the film definitely does stick out. Take, for instance, the prologue in this film, which is an excellent set piece, may I add. The whole thing, and it's the thing that they showed before, like, Rise of Skywalker and Birds of Prey and things like that. This big action set piece at a concert hall and them trying to prevent this bomb from going off. It's exciting on its own. It's exhilarating, but in the context of the movie, it just isn't as exciting because we don't really understand what's going on here. Why is this so significant? What exactly are they trying to prevent aside from just this one thing? It's things like that where, yes, I am invested because it's a really well-done action set piece and it's very thrilling and you know what can happen. But aside from that, what are the personal stakes in this mission? That's just unclear to us. That's not something that we know a lot about. And that was something that really did annoy me when it comes to this movie. For me, the best thing about this movie, though, without a doubt, is Ludwig Göransson's score is fantastic here. And look, I've said this before, but he is very quickly becoming one of my favorite composers after this movie, mainly because of just how diverse he is. When you listen to his score for Black Panther or The Mandalorian, it doesn't sound like the same person is composing it. And the same with Tenet here. The way that he goes about constructing this score, it is mind-numbingly great. It is easily the best thing about this movie. It's so riveting and exhilarating. The way the time is constantly moving here, I think, is really well done. And I was just very impressed when it came to the score in this movie. I was definitely very invested with it. And it's the thing that, again, stuck out to me the most. I can't wait to listen to the score on its own. It's definitely one of my favorites of the year, and I just absolutely adored the score in this movie. And there are even times where the audio itself quite literally is moving in like a reverse speed, like kind of like how time is moving reverse, is like reversing. The way that the score kind of correlates with that is really interesting. I think that Göransson did a lot of cool shit when it comes to this movie, and it definitely did elevate a lot of what was going on there, I think. So I was very impressed by the score here for sure. In terms of editing, though, this is another issue I have with this film. I just think this film is very choppily edited, which is not something that I would have expected, but that really is the case when it comes to this movie. I just think it's far too messy. Scenes happen way too quickly. There were honestly points where I thought I was missing something because information is presented in such a rapid speed. it almost felt like Nolan did not think that we would have the patience to sit through a film that, is a lot of dialogue. It's not very dialogue heavy. There is dialogue in this movie, but there's a lot of action sequences. There's a lot of other stuff that's going on. There are explosions, and there's just too much of it. I think the film needed to take a second to breathe, but there really isn't that time where you can just kind of sit there and absorb everything. His other films have done that, but considering that this is one of Nolan's longest, if not his longest film yet, I expect a lot more from this for sure. And again, the fact that it didn't deliver, the fact that I don't feel like I still have a full understanding of what was going on throughout the majority of this movie, that's when you know there is a problem here. That's when you know that there clearly is a lot more that Nolan needed to dive into, and he just simply didn't. And it just really let me down in terms of editing. I think there was so much more that he could have accomplished there, and he just really didn't at all. But easily the most frustrating thing about this movie, aside from the screenplay, is what we eventually get revealed for. Because I have heard a lot of things about this movie going in that, the twist in this film is game-changing, it recontextualizes the whole film, and I can say this, yes, it does, but I don't think it's a necessary twist really at all. For the first time, this really feels like the only reason this twist is here is because Nolan needed it to be. Nolan is someone who has always been about spectacle, he's always been about twists, and it really just felt like he was scratching his head and not understanding what he wanted to do in terms of a twist. He knew he wanted to do something, but he couldn't figure out what exactly he wanted, and so he came up with this thing at the last second, and it's honestly really dumb. Like, really just thinking about what the twist is in this movie is really fucking stupid. It's not one that I think elevates the film at all. It doesn't add anything. It just makes it a little bit less special. It makes it a lot more generic, and you watch the film and you're just kind of like, that's it? Like, that's really how I felt coming out of it. I needed more, and I'm not entirely sure what it was, but I think there needed to be something more to this film than what Nolan did. The sound design as well, people have talked about this. Yes, it is definitely really good, but I'm not gonna lie, there were some key points where I could not tell what was being said in terms of dialogue. I don't know if I entirely fault the sound design for this though, because it is a very loud and exciting film, and definitely is one that I think you will be immersed in. But I do think that, again, the dialogue is just too quick. Everything is just too quick in this film, and you just needed that time to breathe and really process the situation, which there just really isn't in this movie. Ultimately, Tenet will be something that you'll enjoy based on two things. What do you want in an action movie? Do you want an action film that is really high stakes, really exhilarating, has some really great action set pieces, has some really impressive stuff technical-wise, or do you want that, but also a grounded story and characters and personal stakes? Because for me, I just need more than these big action set pieces. I need personal stakes in characters. I need actual development from characters. I need to be able to understand what's going on. And when I can't do that, the film's just kind of lost me, and unfortunately, that's exactly what happened with Tenet. I think Nolan got so caught up on what he's able to do technical-wise, which again is impressive, but he got so focused on that he did not consider what he needs to do story-wise. He did not consider what he needs to do in order to tell a good story here. He did not consider what he needs to do in order to, get me to care about any of these characters. That's not something that he was really focused on this time, which is very surprising to me. And yes, you can say the same thing for Dunkirk, but the reason I think it worked in Dunkirk is because all of those characters are going through a similar situation. They're in this war. Things are very tense. They don't know if they're going to survive, and that's all the personal stakes that we need. Something like Tenet, this is a very complex espionage film. it does not work the same way as it did in a war film, because everyone is going through this mission for different reasons, but we don't really understand those reasons. And the film is done, the way it's presented, everything is in a very haphazard and messy way. There is some really good stuff with Elizabeth Debicki's character. I did enjoy her quite a bit. I think there are some good performances in this movie. The score by Louis Göransson is fantastic. It is otherworldly. It is definitely the best thing about this movie for sure. But in terms of story, it was just severely lacking for me. And it especially leads up to such a messy and really dumb ending. And I just expected a lot more from Nolan. I think that's really what it was here. The fact that Nolan hyped this up so much, it just left a real sour taste in my mouth. I think I was just expecting so much more from it. And when you hype up a film so consistently, and I get it, we're going through a pandemic right now. You're trying to do everything you can to get people to see these movies. But even before that, even before we were going through like the coronavirus and such, Nolan was still hyping this up to be his most ambitious film yet. Something that is really complex. And yes, it is complex, but not in a way story-wise. It's complex to the point where you just don't understand what's going on throughout a lot of it. And while yes, I think that can be fixed in repeated viewings, if I'm being honest, I have no real desire to watch this film again, mainly because there just wasn't enough here that impressed me the first time around for me to want to watch it again. I might go back and watch some of the action set pieces because admittedly they are really well put together. The car chase, the opening scene at the concert hall, this really elaborate action set piece in the finale. What he's able to do there is definitely very impressive. But as a whole, I just can't see myself going back to this film all that much. I really do think, unfortunately, this is Nolan's weakest effort for me. I think there's just so much more he could have done there. And unfortunately, I just was not that impressed by this film at the end of the day. I feel like I understand the complaints that people have when it comes to Nolan films now. Those non-fans of Nolan, I've never understood more than I did walking out of this movie, because the characters are lacking. The story is lacking. The action is great, but at what cost? The score is great, but at what cost? And I don't think that's something that Nolan really thought about. And overall, it just left me very disappointed in this film. Tenet, I think, had so much potential, and I just wanted so much more from. And I am going to give Tenet overall a C+. So, despite how disappointing this film was for me, I will say it was amazing to see a film in the theaters again. As I said in my movie preview, I'm trying to do that more often. I'm trying to watch more stuff because I really haven't been lately. And this was definitely refreshing. It was really cool to see a film in the theaters again. It was really cool to see it with a crowd, to not have to rent it on VOD and things like that. Not something that I'm used to, because I have become more accustomed to that. Well, not accustomed to, but it's something that I've become used to. So the fact that I was able to go out to a theater definitely is special, and I think the film is worth seeing for that alone. But unfortunately for me, I just wanted a lot more from it overall. But that being said, that is it for my review of Tenet. Let me know what you guys saw this movie. Left your thoughts in it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.